Hey everybody, today is Monday, December 23rd, 2024. Coming up on the show today, from Nosferatu, editor Louise Ford.
As a child, I was always drawn to the darker side of fiction. I don't know what to tell you. I grew up reading ghost stories. I didn't think too deeply about the fact that we were taking on a classic. If I'm perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of cover songs. You know, when another band does a cover of a song, I hate that. It can't just be a cliched by-the-book horror movie with the set number of jump scares and all that stuff. There has to be something more to it than that. I find I don't go out and watch every single horror movie that comes out because, just like any other genre, majority of them are bad.
Yes, all that and more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Well, ho, 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 my friends. I hope you are in the holiday spirit because we have a timeless holiday classic to talk about today. Of course, I mean Nosferatu. So, you know how people often debate whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Well, Nosferatu pushes the boundaries of that even further. It's being released on Christmas Day, so there's that. And it is Christmas time in the film. And if you don't know what Nosferatu is about, you're probably thinking, what's the deal, rough cut guy? Shut up and get on with it. Well, the thing is, Nosferatu is about a vampire. His name is Count Orlok, and he doesn't come down the chimney to give gifts. He comes to suck your blood and creep on your wife. Maybe I should actually give you a little more detailed description of the film's plot. In the 1830s, estate agent Thomas Hutter travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok, a prospective client. In his absence, Hutter's new bride Ellen is left under the care of their friends Friedrich and Anna Harding. Plagued by horrific visions and an increasing sense of dread, Ellen soon encounters an evil force that's far beyond her control. Now, this film, from writer-director Robert Eggers, is a remake of the 1922 silent horror classic of the same name from German director FW Murnau. I believe it's fair to say that FW took a few liberties with Bram Stoker's work Dracula. Regardless, the film is a classic and shows up with regularity on Turner Classic Movies and in the curricula of many a fine film school. And that's all well and good. But what matters most to me, to us, if I dare say, is the talented woman who edited this remake. And that would be Louise, you can call me Lou, Ford. Lou has worked with Eggers on several films, both short and feature length, notably The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman. What will she have to say about their latest together, this Nosferatu movie? Will she recommend you bring the kids to see it during your holiday break, after you've all stuffed your faces and complained that nobody got you what you really wanted? She might. She says a lot of things. A lot of fun and insightful things. Yes, I really enjoyed talking to Lou, and I think you will enjoy listening to it. Think of it as my gift to you. And here's another. Some sage advice on getting the best music for your own horror/holiday story. And that is by going to see those sonic gift givers at Extreme Music. Extreme Music, as you should know, creates and licenses production music crafted by multi-award-winning artists, musicians, and composers. Scary big names like Hans Zimmer, Bear McCreary, Trent Reznor, Paul Oakenfold. They even got a guy on there who travels under the name Mucho De Niro. Why didn't I think of that? Yes, music plays a huge part in making a great horror movie or any kind of movie. And you can find just what you need by searching the catacombs of their catalog using terms like mood, tempo, genre. Genre will definitely help for a horror movie. And then when you get those tracks back, you can use their stem mixer to dial up just the instruments you want in those tracks. You can do it all online, including the licensing. Or you can get help from one of their reps from around the world. Transylvania notwithstanding. Maybe you should do the online thing if you're in Transylvania. How's the internet there? I bet it sucks. Yeah, that was bad. But there is nothing but good. Make that great. Music awaiting you when you partner up with the best in the production audio biz. Extreme Music. All right, let's get on with today's featured attraction. From the UK by way of New York City, here is Nosferatu editor Lou Ford. That's right.
Yeah. You guys don't know. You were in LA, right? You don't know what cold is yet.
No, I'm not in LA. I'm in Boston.
Oh, yeah. You do know what cold is.
I sure do. It's getting colder by the minute here.
Yeah. I mean, they don't even know what cold is in England, honestly. I didn't realise until I moved here. But anyway, that's another subject. I'm sure you've got more interesting stuff you want to ask me about.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, Lou. The first thing I want to know is what kind of sick minds released a movie like this on Christmas Day?
do you mean? It's a Christmas present for all the goths out there.
That's a great way to look at it. All right. Well, you know what? Let's go with a question that's a little less aggressive. Your roster of credits includes more than a few films of the horror, thriller, supernatural variety. What attracts you to this extended genre, and how might your particular skills as an editor pair well with it?
I have to be honest with you, I'm not particularly attracted to it as a genre. Honestly, seriously, I'm attracted to a good script. So if it's a good script, that's what attracts me. I mean, I suppose the first film that I worked on that made an impact was The Witch, which falls into that folk horror category, which I absolutely love. I mean, this is a more, academic argument about what constitutes horror, what constitutes folk story. I do not really like dividing stories into genres. I know we have to when we're talking about films and stuff, but even when I go into a bookstore, it slightly irritates me that you have the contemporary fiction is just fiction. Science fiction is cordoned off and horror fiction is cordoned off. Fantasy fiction is cordoned off. And really, to my mind, contemporary fiction is as much a genre as anything else. Traditional low-budget indie movies. I watched a really great movie last night, My Old Ass. Brilliant movie. A really beautiful example of to my mind, falls into that American indie movie genre perfectly and really beautifully done. But it is a genre, It is a genre. Anyway, I got off the topic. For me, as a child, I was always drawn to the darker side of fiction. I don't know what to tell you. I grew up reading ghost stories and, Dennis Wheatley. And I was the kid that stayed up after everybody else had gone to bed to watch the Hammer horror movies that were always shown on British TV after 11 o'clock at night, I think that's partly because my mum was actually interested in all that kind of stuff. So those books were lying around, James Herbert and Stephen King and all that stuff. So I am drawn to the horror thing. But I think, the thing that I suppose the reason why I don't want to embrace it completely as a genre, because I don't do a film because it's a horror film. I do a film if the script resonates with me and if there's something. It can't just be a cliched by the book horror movie with the set number of jump scares and all that stuff. There has to be something more to it than that. I find I don't go out and watch every single horror movie that comes out because just like any other genre, majority of them are bad, Like the majority of everything is bad. The majority, you wanted snob? You wanted a snobby question? Here's your answer. The majority of everything is bad. The majority of music is bad. The majority of art is, I only want to do good stuff. That's my answer. So it comes down to the script. And so for The Witch, or even before that, The Telltale Heart, which was the first short film that Rob and I met Rob almost 20 years ago now. I think we worked it out 17 years when we did The Telltale Heart, the short film, which is an adaptation of the Edgar Allan Poe story. Of course, it's been done many, many times before as a short. Just the first page of reading the script, I'm like, this is bringing some psychological depth and something much more visually interesting to this well-worn story. And that's what I'm looking for. And you can say the same for Nosferatu. Obviously, with Rob, whatever he does, I'm there. The reason that he chose me to be his editor on that first short film was because when we met and we started talking about our influences, and they were just very aligned in terms of, art, literature, movies, as to what makes somebody drawn to that. I think it's a safe space. Obviously, in life, we all have to deal with the inevitability and also the hard times. And I think that whatever you're going through, sometimes it's easier to experience the fear through a conduit of a sort of a fictional story, whether that's reading or watching a movie or, or working on them. Yeah. Sorry, I bent your ear a bit there. Sorry.
Never.
I do go on.
Well, you started talking about Rob, and obviously my next question was going to be about him, about that first meeting. How much your process with him evolved over all these years?
I mean, really, we both learned our respective jobs together doing it. I had another career before I started off in film editing. I was a journalist in London for about 10 years before my husband and I moved over here. So I took an editing course in 2007. in the spring of that year. And the autumn of that year was when I was cutting The Telltale Heart. It was literally the first thing I ever actually edited. I was working as an assistant editor on an indie feature film. And, being a bit older than most people starting out, I was in my late 30s, I was impatient to cut as soon as possible. So through a mutual friend, actually the runner that was working on the movie, she said to me, I'm producing this short film. Would you want to cut? And I'm like, yeah, I want to cut immediately. Let's look at the script. And she gave me the script and I was talk about luck, right? As I said, I'd already spent a lot of time in one career that I quite enjoyed. But when I made this switch, I was very adamant because I sort of ended up working on a publication I wasn't crazy about, even though it was all great and fun and stuff. But, you only get to go around on this planet once.
So I'm told.
Yeah, so they say. 70 years if you're lucky, I always think. And I want to spend my time doing something I really actually am into and care about. I get the script and I'm just like, wow. One of the first scripts I ever read, and it is this good, it's this original, it's this unique, it's this well written, it's this visual, it's this dude's already like fully formed, script writer. So I cut The Telltale Heart on Final Cut Pro 7, which is the platform that I'd learned to edit on at a place called the Edit Center in New York, run by Alan Oxman, a brilliant, brilliant school. And, Rob, he was just starting out. I was just starting out. We basically learnt together. Jarin Blatchke was the cinematographer on that. So really, the three of us, our journey working together as filmmakers started there. And I'm sure Jarin would probably tell you the same thing, or maybe he wouldn't, but that we all learnt as each successive project got a little bit bigger, and it was the Robert Eggers Film School. I don't know what, but he was a pupil too. We were all learning together, and that was what's been so, I think that's part of what's bonded us so well as a sort of creative filmmaking team. So we did The Telltale Heart and then did The Witch in 2014. It was about 7 years later. In the meantime, I continued to hone my skill as an editor because I was an assistant editor on a bunch of indie features, cutting other shorts. I think I cut my first feature in 2011, and then I cut another feature, and then The Witch. I think The Witch was the third feature that I had edited. And then from there, each film, The Lighthouse, was a bigger budget, more money for the sets and all that. So, each film sort of successively got bigger. Then The Northman, of course, was a huge leap for all of us, more for Rob and Jarin, I think, than me, because I had done some bigger budget movies. I did Don't Breathe with Fede Alvarez, Bad Education with Corey Finley. I think that was that was a bigger budget, and it's easier as an editor to keep getting more experience. Obviously, if you're a director, you might wait 4 years between projects, But at this point, I see the beautiful work that Jarin produces, and Craig Lathrop, the production designer, and Linda Muir, the costume designer. They both came on board with The Witch. They were both actually they have more experience than Rob, Jarin, all right. But Rob is very good at choosing his collaborators, obviously. And the same goes for his actors, who are also collaborators. He knows what he is looking for and he knows what he wants. And he's honestly, a dream director to work for as well. He's open to collaboration, which is such a dream scenario.
Well, whatever the journey was, it led you to this film, Nosferatu. It's a story that's almost as old as the title character. The original film, it's a classic and a staple of film school curricula. It came out in 1922.
Over 100 years.
Yeah, crazy.
Can you believe it?
Well, I can't believe it's December and I haven't finished my Christmas shopping.
I hear you. I haven't started it.
I don't mean to keep you. But in the horror film genre, what you and Robert and company are doing could be compared to remaking Citizen Kane. What did Robert say to you about why he wanted to remake this, in any ways he might have wanted to either honor or depart from the original?
Wow. Well, I'm glad nobody used the Citizen Kane analogy before I started. That's a bit intimidating. I didn't think too deeply about the fact that we were taking on a classic. If I'm perfectly honest, I'm not a fan of cover songs, when another band does a cover of a song. I hate that. But I think if you get, you're making me, this is a good question, Matt, because you're making me really think about this aspect of it, which I guess I didn't really put a lot of thought into because I've just been so immersed in Robert's version of it over the years, reading the scripts and thinking about it from that point of view. You know, obviously I've watched Murnau's a few times over that time. Me personally, I did not want to have that in my head when I was cutting this movie. What I have to deal with is what they give me. So I'm just going to make that to the best of my ability. I don't recall really taking any ideas about the editing from the original. It would be subconscious, if anything, and I'm sure there are moments that are subconsciously similar, but that's a really good question. I remember watching, when I went to see the Herzog one again, I remember thinking to myself, oh, the music's brilliant there. Oh, that shot's amazing. That bit's not so good. Like, you know, like you sort of think going through it and the weaker parts, the great parts. Obviously, Klaus Kinski is such a seminal, and Isabella Gianni. I suppose, if anything, I was more aware of that version, probably because it's speaking and it's a more modern version of it, you know. But I do think that Robert's version of this story does have several key differences. It's deeper, it's more psychological. Ellen is obviously way more developed, and her side of the story, you know, it's told from her point of view. And there's all sorts of modern interpretations you can read into how she's treated as a woman of the time. So to me, it's much richer in that respect. And not only that, the sort of vampire folklore of it all, the Roma ceremony that we see, we've never seen that in any version of this story. I mean, maybe there's sort of like an obscure 70s Dracula movie that does that. But I don't remember seeing that. You know, usually the superstitions of the Roma people, you know, in Transylvania are sort of spoken about, but you never see it actually enacted in front of you. Yeah, I mean, I do think he's added enough original ideas to take it further, you know. He's done something different with it. You know, like when a band covers a song, you're like, you don't want it to try and sound like the original. You have to do something else more interesting, right?
I totally agree.
Yeah. You know, Rob's been talking about the fact that he first discovered the Nosferatu film when he was like, I don't know, 9 or something. He saw a picture of Max Schreck on the cover of a book at school and was immediately captivated. His mom hunted down a VHS, a bad quality VHS of it. It has been restored since then, but at the time, it was a bad quality VHS. He watched it and has been sort of obsessed ever since. I mean, it was going to be the second movie after The Witch, but, you know, he realized the kind of budget he would need to do the story justice, to make it as elaborate and beautiful and detailed as he wanted to. So, you know, The Witch, I think the budget for The Witch was like $3 million. So to leap from that to something more than 10 times that in one go, I think that he realized that he would like take a little step with The Lighthouse instead of doing the big thing. And he did try to get it made. Well, we were in post on The Northman, actually. Basically, he's tried to put it together and it's fallen apart a few times. As far as, you know, sending me a list of films or recommended things to watch before I started working on this, I think the thing about my relationship with Robert is that it's so long-standing. You know, it's almost 20 years. And during that time, we are already aligned. He doesn't really need to tell me to watch a certain film to get my head into it, because he knows that my head's already there. I'm already aligned with his aesthetic taste, what he likes, what he doesn't like. You know, we figured all that out in the first 10 years of working together, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, you know, on The Witch, essentially, you know. I think if I was a new crew member coming in, somebody that he hadn't worked with before, sure, I'm sure. And I bet he does for the actor, you know, especially any new actors that he's adding to the troupe. I'm sure he sends them a bunch of films to watch so they get him. But we're almost telepathic at this point, you know, in the edit room. It's true. I mean, in the edit room, we'll watch something down, scene down, and then I'll go, oh, I'm just gonna, and he'll say the thing that I was just gonna do, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I was gonna do. And we do it, you know. We're very sibling-like in that way after all these years, and, you know, I love him like a brother.
The film was shot on location in the Czech Republic and Romania, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. We shot this in Prague. The stages were at Barrandov Studios, which is where they shot Amadeus, which is great. There's actually a shot in the movie in the very long corridor at the hospital. It's not set, it's a real building in Prague that is in Amadeus, I believe, at one point. I'm usually on location. What happens is, so I have an edit room in Prague for the 4 months that they were shooting this. Rob and Jarin and Craig, the production designer, and Linda, they'll all be there doing pre-production 3 or 4 months before they start shooting. Craig built a backlot in Prague for the street scenes, those beautiful street scenes at the beginning when Hutter's running through. That's all, a backlot set. And all the interiors are sets in this film, which to me is astonishing. When I think of that interior of the castle, Craig Lathrop created that. It's not a real castle, although you would never know it. So they start shooting. Most of it was shot in Prague. I don't know exactly, but maybe 5 or 6 days shooting in Romania for the village scene and some of the exteriors, the castle. They shot 2 different castles. Don't ask me what they were called. I can't remember. But the exteriors are in the courtyard and stuff when Hutter first shows up, and then later on when he's trying to escape. Those exterior castle shots are in Transylvanian castles. One of the castles is the same castle that Herzog used, but a different location of that castle. So, fun fact. I'm in Prague the whole time. I didn't go to... I don't need to travel to Romania while they're shooting that stuff. But the way that Rob and I work is when they're shooting this was shot on film. So the turnaround time was really good on this because Prague's really set up for that kind of post workflow. But so, I get the tap footage, what they call the tap footage, which is a video machine that's sort of attached to the film camera. So I can get that the next day, which gives me an idea of... It's not obviously you can't judge the focus or you can't see what it's really going to look like in terms of the quality of the image, but I can see what they're shooting and from what angle, the blocking and of the actors and stuff. So my workflow is I will cut together the tap. I have my assistants prep those tap clips as if they were the real clips, basically, the real takes. So I'll have a scene bin in the Avid, scene 1, and then it'll have a scene 1 folder, and then within that folder, there'll be a folder that is scene 1 takes, and a folder that is scene 1 tap, and then a folder that is scene 1 sequences, and that's basically how I work. So on a daily basis, I would get the tap. A lot of times I edit that tap footage together, that when the film comes in, obviously I'll watch all the dailies just to make sure, and then just really match the edit. Unless I want to change it, unless there's something in the film that I see when I get the actual film that makes me want to change the edit. So we progress like that. Obviously, like any editor working at the same time that the film's being shot, the aim is to keep up with the shooting. It's not always possible. It's never possible. Let me just say that. I've never managed it yet, but I try. I'll be cutting scenes every day. If I get any dailies in, I'll put the scene cutting to one side, watch the dailies first so that I can immediately tell Robert, while they're shooting. I mean, that's the benefit of being there, is that I can say, yeah, this scene, I don't think I'm really getting the story. Maybe you need to shoot a close-up or something, Yeah. It doesn't happen very often because he and Jarin figure the camera out so meticulously. But sometimes you just don't see till you get into the edit if a story point is getting across in, the way that you want it to. And then what usually happens is they shoot 5 days a week. And then one day at the weekend, either the Saturday or the Sunday, depending on what the rest of his schedule is, Robert will come into the edit room and we watch what I've cut. He might want to see a particular sequence or a particular scene, or he might even want to watch although this didn't happen that much, but he may want to watch some dailies if it says, a particular scene he just really wants to see bigger, not on his laptop, in other words. So, yeah, it's quite a close collaboration even while they're shooting. And in terms of, I would go to the set occasionally while they're shooting in the studios. I mean, it's useful sometimes. I remember Walter Murch saying that he never liked to be on set because he would feel too beholden to all the work that had gone into creating a particular shot. He worried that it might prevent him from deciding to cut it.
Right.
I guess I'm just a bastard because I don't care. I'm quite happy to go and just watch them shoot it and be like, in the edit, meh. Although that doesn't happen with Rob's films, I have to say. But I, in The Telltale Heart, the trickiest shot, I remember this very well because I actually script supervised that shoot. So I was on there every day while they were shooting The Telltale Heart. And there is one scene, super low budget, very low budget short film. So you can imagine we didn't have the curved dolly track that we really needed to make this particular shot. So it took Jarin is Jarin anyway, but even for him, it was a long time to set this shot up. It took about 5 hours to set up using pieces of straight dolly. If you can imagine it, to try and make a curved dolly track, we got the shot. But it took hours and hours. And I remember saying to Jarin, because it was just so stressful, and he was like, meh, nobody remembers any of this when you make a great movie. Think about Apocalypse Now. And I'm like, yeah, fair point. So we got the shot, beautiful. And then what happens when I get into the edit? Don't need it. It slows. It actually is. It's detrimental to it. The film. It was a beautiful shot, but at that particular moment where it would go, or any other place that you put it, we tried putting it millions of different places. It just slowed the film down and was completely unnecessary in the end. So.
It's good to be tough like that as an editor. You have to be like that.
You do. And I think because my previous job, when I worked in journalism, I was what's called a sub-editor / production editor in England. I think you call them copy editors here, but it was my job to actually cut the copy down and, maybe rewrite the intro, write the headline, mold it in the similar kind of way that you mold the film from the edit room. So maybe I was just practiced at that when I started, or maybe I'm just maybe I'm just a bastard. I don't know.
Honestly, Lou, that's not for me to say.
Yeah.
So I will just ask you another question.
Yeah.
We're talking about camera work a little bit.
Yeah.
Ellen, the lead character played by Lily Rose Depp, she has these sort of trances or states of being possessed she goes into. And in the film, she describes them as a feeling of being awake, but in a dream. And as she said that in the film, I was like, yeah, that's kind of what this film feels like stylistically. The pace of it and the floating, panning, rotating camera work. I was talking to an editor recently. He said, well, I was selling this style of editing to the director. And I said, oh, good. What is that style of editing? He's like, I don't know how to put that into words. But since you're a real bastard, Lou, I'm going to ask you, how would you describe the style you were going for in the editing?
Invisible. It's not trendy anymore to say that. It's really not. But I really don't want the editing to get in the way of... I don't want the editing to announce itself. I don't want you to be distracted out of the story. It's the lot of the editor to be overlooked, to be not noticed. And in some respects, I was talking to Angela Barson, who's the visual effects supervisor on the film and was on The Northman as well. She kind of said, I love it when they say there's no visual effects because that means I've done my job. And it's similar, not quite the same, but it's similar with editing because I feel like it's in the script, the interplay between what's real, what's not real. To a certain extent, it's Rob's whole thing. If you think about The Lighthouse, the mental states of both the men in that, played by Willem and Robert Pattinson, you never know, is one of them hallucinating? Are they both hallucinating? Maybe neither of them are there. Maybe they're both there. Maybe it's all real. Maybe none of it is real. It starts with the script, and then obviously it's how it's shot with the lighting and the camera movements. I'm thinking particularly in Nosferatu of when Hutter is walking to Orlok's castle and he finds himself at a crossroads at night, right? And the carriage starts coming towards him. I mean, we're already laying the seeds of making that time and place feel a little bit unreal because of the sound design, and because of the music. Those things work together with the visual, obviously, and then the carriage sort of is coming towards him, and then the next minute it's sideways on, and then he's floating into it. All these things together, especially with the sound design and the music, convey this kind of dream state. And then he's in the carriage, and when he gets out of the carriage, the camera sort of tilts up to his face. You got a close-up. It's the interplay of those three things, I think, really: sound design, music, camera, but also the pacing of the edits, I suppose. suppose. I don't know if I can really take too much credit for that, but, I definitely lay the sound bed in when I'm pitching. I mean, how I do it is I can't do that without sound. So I'm lucky that a friend of mine who's a sound designer gave me Alan Splett's library of sound design. Alan Splett was David Lynch's sound recordist. He recorded a lot of analog sounds, not digital. So he would, all those, when you think of a David Lynch film and you think of the rumbles and the hums that are always on in the background, that's because Alan Splett went into these old factories in the 1980s and recorded the machinery, at night when there wasn't people around. So I've got a whole library of all that stuff and loads of other. One of the libraries is called Sounds from a Different Realm. And one of the libraries is called, oh God, what is it called? Oh, I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, he's got all these very strange, you can't really tell what they are, hums, voices. And I use them to craft the soundscape for me when I'm editing that sequence in particular. So before I had the music or before Damien Volpe, the sound designer, did his thing, I was doing that in the picture edit. And it's good. I hadn't really thought about it to that extent. But yes, sound really helps.
Somewhere in that answer, you used the words, I can't take credit for that. You better start taking credit for some things. In fact, I'm going to use that as the basis of my next obnoxious film school question. And this is the one when I wrote it, I said, oh God, that's pretentious. But I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go for it.
On the classic surprise versus suspense scale, although there are more than enough startling and even shocking moments in the film, the majority of the time the film feels like a gothic melodrama. And what you're really trying to instill in the audience is not shock, but really more of like a feeling of dread and unease. And the trick with that, the trap you want to avoid is I don't want to slow things down to the point where it's laconic or the pace seems to lumber. And I would just like to talk about the challenge in doing that. And were there certain elements of the story or certain scenes that demanded more of your attention to keep it flowing as well as you did?
That is a great question. And those kind of scenes are the scenes that sort of take the most work. I'm thinking of when the carriage is coming towards Hutter in that crossroads, for example, or in the hold of the ship when the first mate has got the axe and he's going towards the crate. So it's very difficult to sort of pace those, when do you cut from shot to reverse shot? Like you said, it's a matter of keeping the tension going and sort of getting to the point where that's the jump scare, if you like, or whatever you want to call it. But if you keep it going too long, then you sort of lost your moment and then it's just, I don't know. And how you do that is very, very hard to articulate because there isn't like a formula for that. I wish I could say, hold this shot for 1 second, then 1 second, then go less, then go less, then go less. I wish there was a formula. You can try and do that. And I have tried in the past, and it's kind of indefinable. You just have to go with your gut. I'm sorry. You just have to sort of feel your way through it. You can't think your way through those kind of things. You've got to feel it. But I will say one thing in terms of the first mate in the hold. That was one of the hardest sequences to cut because the actor, it's one of those things you can't really know till you get in the edit room how you're going to direct this guy. But, when they shot it, the guy's coming down to the hold. He's terrified of everything everywhere, right? Every noise, he's going to look to the right, to the left. He's going to flinch or something. And I needed him to just be concentrating on that chest. I didn't need him to be doing that. I needed him to just be looking forward at the chest in order to build that psychic connection for the audience to feel that that's what he was scared of more than anything else. So it took a lot of editing. I don't know what else the word is. It took a lot of, you really had to find, because he would barely hold his eyes still for a second even. So that took a lot of figuring out. And, how quickly he gets to the crate. The crate is also obviously the camera is going towards the crate. So there's the interplay between, obviously the whole point of editing is you can bend time. So you can make it take much longer than it actually takes him to get there. If you're cutting between the shot of him walking towards the crate and the crate coming towards him as he's walking towards it, you can manipulate that. But those things do take time. They definitely take time.
Lou Ford, time bender. You could not have teed up my next question any better than if I had emailed you about it in advance. So you worked with Fede Alvarez on Don't Breathe back in, I think it came out in 2016.
Yeah.
When I spoke to the post team of Alien Romulus, they shared that Fede gave them the formula for jump scares.
Really?
Yes. He said the formula for jump scares is to get the audience to be tense and then give them a reason to exhale. And then just as they're at the bottom of that exhale, that's when you hit them. So does that ring true to your time working with Fede? And is there anything you would add to that? I know you just said you can't articulate a jump scare, but now hearing his take on it.
I mean, if that works for him, that's great. I don't think of it in those terms. But I will say, though, the breath thing, I use people's breaths a lot when I'm editing. I mean, obviously in this film, Orlok's breaths are, they help me pace the scenes. And I mean, you could say it's a formula if you like. A lot of times if I'm holding a shot and there's a character who's breathing and it's a tense shot and you can hear the character's breath, I tend to cut on the intake. I find that's a lot more tense. If something's coming towards me and I'm like, and I cut there, that's way more tense than letting the air out. I think if you let the air out, then you missed it. So I guess me and Fede are in complete disagreement about that. But, like I said, whatever works for you, that's fine. And, maybe it's all just, maybe it's all this hot air anyway. And at the end of the day, I don't know, maybe it would be just as good if you cut on the outtake. But I've got my own little rule about that, so.
No, that's a good one. You dropped some science there. I think people learned something right there. That's good stuff.
I don't know whether it's science. I will say this. Fede tweeted after he saw Nosferatu and said that he really liked it and he thought it was the best. In fact, he went. I wasn't there, but he went up to Rob after the screening he was at. I guess it was in LA, and said to him, "That's the best horror film this year," which I think is incredibly honourable and just incredibly cool thing of him to say. And I hadn't really had any contact with him since I cut Don't Breathe. Our paths hadn't crossed since then. And I emailed him to say, that's really cool that you said that. So
you might be surprised, but there's more than a few tweets praising this film. But, keep an eye out for him.
Yeah. If I only had time, I'm too busy on the film I'm doing now, unfortunately.
That's not unfortunate. Better to be working than doom scrolling.
That's true. Yeah, and I do find time to, obviously, as soon as the reviews came out, the first thing I did was get on Rotten Tomatoes to see how it had gone down.
It's doing okay.
Yeah, it's doing okay. Yeah, and people seem to like it.
When you're working with a lot of silence and a lot of dimly lit rooms, are you thinking more about things like Atmos? Do you spend a lot more time doing panning and do you monitor in 5.1 in the cutting room, or is a lot of that stuff you think better left down the road?
I just do stereo sound in the edit room because I think, like Joe Walker said once, and I agree with him, that that's really the best way for you to work. I'm not working in a 5.1 theatre, So anyway, I cannot cut without cutting the sound. I have to have some sound to help me cut the picture. And if I have, like, for example, a noisy dialogue track that's distracting, I'll get my assistant to quieten it up, or I'll match back to the ISOs, the lav mics on the actors, anything to sort of make it as clean as possible. I want to try and get the sound bed. I like to design the sound bed that then goes on to the sound designer, and of course they make it a million times better. I just feel like sound and picture are so, especially with Robert's films, it is such an important part of building the atmosphere. I mean, Robert's films are all about atmosphere and putting you in that place. And, it's quite a strange place. It's quite a strange place. So, mostly. So you have to build that I can't edit Orlok, for example, without hearing his breaths. And I quite often move his breaths around. Like if there's a particular shot and there's a particularly, phlegmy breath that is also threatening. That sounds, but it's in a different part of the scene. I'll take that breath and put it on the picture of Orlok that we're looking at because I particularly want that particular threatening breath sound, and of course dialogue. I mean, we're replacing dialogue constantly on Robert's films. Constantly I'm using different audio takes with the audio takes that don't match the picture take, in other words.
Well, Lou, not only did you do a great job on this film, you did a great job putting up with my obnoxious film school style questions. I I think to be fair to you, we have to close on a light, easy one. And that is when, not if, but when people go see Nosferatu, they have the option to buy their popcorn in one of the truly greatest concessionary tie-ins in cinematic history. The popcorn comes in a replica of Orlok's coffin. I would like one of those if anyone listening right now cares. But my question to you, Lou, is what do you get a vampire for Christmas when he already has his own popcorn bucket coffin?
Well, you have to get him a stuffed rat to go with it, I think.
I don't need one of those.
Actually, I'm only saying that because I'm as much of a... I mean, this is the thing why I'm an editor, right? I did not go to film school. You mentioned film school a couple of times. I didn't go to film school. Rob didn't go to film school. I wanted to work in films because I'm a audience member as much as anybody else. I want to see, these kind of films. When I first started working with Rob, it's like, brilliant. I want to see this. The reason I want to work on it is because I want to see it actually in reality. So I've already bought my ticket to get the popcorn bucket. I have no shame. And if you do it at the Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn, you get a plushy rat with the with the coffin. I think it's hilarious, honestly. We are enjoying this marketing ride as much as, in shock and astonishment, the idea that a Robert Eggers film, when we started, with The Witch in 2014, the idea that his weird, dark vision would ever inspire a Hollywood marketing campaign on this level was beyond laughable. And now it's, Focus Features are doing such an incredible job promoting the movie. And it's so, I see it only as a mark of how much belief they have in Robert as a filmmaker. I'm just blown away by it. And honestly, so yeah, I have bought my ticket. I'm going to see it on IMAX. I'm going to see it on Christmas Day. I'm going to see the 35mm projected version. I'm going to see the version where I get the popcorn bucket. I sort of messaged Rob, guess what? We made a popcorn movie. It's brilliant.
As far as the ride goes, you earned it, so enjoy it.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it so far.
And you just keep on enjoying it, Lou. You earned it. Now, do I think Nosferatu is the vampire version of It's a Wonderful Life or Miracle on 34th Street? Not quite. But whether or not anyone considers it a holiday movie, it is expertly crafted. And that is thanks in no small part to the talents of Lou. Thank you, Ms. Ford, for taking some time to talk with us today about Nosferatu. She was fun, wasn't she? I look forward to having her back on the show again someday. And like you, I look forward to taking a little break. I still have some last-minute shopping to do, which means I have some last-minute wrapping to do. So I better wrap this up. There are some big holidays to celebrate this week, if you are so inclined. If you celebrate Christmas, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. I guess in honor of our featured guest today, you could make that Happy Christmas. No, that does not sound right. You can stick an extra U in all the words you like, my UK friends, but it is Merry Christmas, not Happy Christmas. Get with it, England. Besides, there's nothing happy about Christmas. Not in my house, anyway. I would also like to express my wishes for a Happy Hanukkah. No, make that Merry Hanukkah. Take that, British Empire. But no matter what you do or do not celebrate, I hope you have some good food, lots of fun, and get to see some people you don't really spend enough time with the rest of the year. I certainly appreciate spending time with you. And I think we'll have time to squeeze in one more podcast before we turn the calendar over to 2025. So stay on the lookout for that. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.